Hello folks, it's Rochelle here. I'm coming to you live from TBA Law, and I'm coming to you with a very special guest today. Not sure if you can see him. This is Prince. This is one of my boys, and we are here because we are talking about animal welfare. Why? We're talking about animal welfare because it is Animal Abuse Awareness Week. So who better to talk to you than me? So we are talking about Oscar's law, as well as your requirements as a pet owner and your requirements if you want to breed your pet. It'll also be relevant if you're wanting to purchase a dog or a cat, because it's going to affect you as well. There is a blog that I wrote on this last year, and there is some new amendments coming about them. There was a lot of controversy when it first came out, so we'll go through some of that as well. So pet ownership, very, very popular topic because so many of us own a pet. There's like about 2,000 dogs registered in Strathbogie alone each year. There's like 30% or something similar to that own a cat, or more than one cat, one or more. And dog ownership, very popular. So it's also important to know where your dog's coming from and that dogs are being treated well. So let's begin with if you own a dog or a cat. There's legislation, and it is called the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. Now, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, or POCTA, has been around since the 1980s, and it sets out best practice for caring for and housing your dog or cat. If you do not meet these requirements, you can be found liable of an offence, and some of these are quite serious. So they have minimum standards and they have best practice. And really, I mean, if you're not following POCTA, what have you got an animal for? It's things like making sure that they've got food, making sure they've got water, making sure they've got shelter, making sure they've got exercise, making sure they're not being abused. Those sort of things that, I mean, if I need to go through those sort of things with you, there's a real problem. So essentially, POCTA is important, and when you hear about the gross animal abuse that as often goes on and people are charged, it's under POCTA. So that's important. And there's new legislation, and the new legislation is what's caused quite a bit of hype, and that's to do with breeding. Breeding is, well, let's face it, breeding is an industry. And I'm sure that everyone watching this today will know that the breeding of dogs and cats, specifically dogs, can be everything from what's often termed as a backyard breeder to a registered breeder, and we'll go through registered breeder, guys, and anything up to what we call commercial breeders, which we are often referred to as puppy farms or puppy mills. So all of that stuff is very, very important to go through, and we have got new legislation that came in 2017 that affects the breeding of dogs and cats. So the legislation I'm talking about is the Puppy Farms Amendment Act. So it's important. And what it does, and it's Victorian legislation, and Victoria is the first state in Australia to actually bring legislation like this in. And it's limiting the number of dogs that any organisation, commercial breeder, hobby breeder can have under certain regulations when they're breeding dogs. So let's go through that, shall we? Let's break it down, because it's quite complex. Many of you will know me, many of you will know that I have dogs, and many of you know that I breed dogs. This little boy here, I'm not sure if you can really see him because he's black, he's Prince. He's come in as my co-host and special guest today. And he is one of my boys, and I bred him myself. He was born in my living room, and I own his mum, and I own his dad, and I own his half-brother, and I own his niece and his nephew. And I bred his niece, his nephew, and his half-brother. So I'm what's called a hobby breeder, or under the legislation, I'm termed as a recreational breeder. Now, this is also important because I'm a member of what's called Dogs Victoria. Dogs Victoria being the state controlling body for the Australian National Kennel Council. Why do we don't even know that? We need to know that because we're treated differently under the legislation to if you're not an ANKC breeder. So ANKC breeders are registered breeders. They produce pedigree dogs and they are dealt with under their own internal rules and regulations set forth by the body, which is the ANKC. The other body for dogs is the greyhound industry. They have organisational status as well. So when you're talking dogs, the legislation talks about applicable organisations. Now, applicable organisations are the Australian National Kennel Council or the Greyhounds. Now, if you are not one of those two organisations, you are not an applicable organisation for the breeding of dogs under this legislation. The cats have got a couple of organisations as well, similar in that they are the Australian National Kennel Council, similar sort of thing, the cat societies. I have to show my bias here and say that even though we are talking dogs and cats and animals in general, I'm going to refer to dogs more because, you know, it's me. So essentially, you need to know if you're a breeder or if you're purchasing a dog, under the new legislation, are you an applicable organisation? If you're a member of an applicable organisation, you can have up to 9 fertile female dogs or cats before you have to be registered with the council as a domestic animal business. If you are not a member of an applicable organisation, if you have 2 or less fertile female dogs or cats and you breed them, you are a microbreeder. You do not need a domestic animal business registration. If you have more than that, you are required to have a registration as a domestic animal business. Now, why this is important is because there's specific regulations with regard to domestic animal businesses that you will need to follow. So, you will need to have the legislation sets out, there's a set amount of space that the dogs and or cats need to be given. There's a set amount of exercise and attention they need to be given. There is regulations regarding the recording of veterinary and worming and those sort of things that the dogs are given, or the cats in that example. And this is all very important. And the legislation also sets out what can happen to the dog or the cat when they have finished breeding. And this has all come about because of the Victorian government's attempt to stamp out what's called puppy farming. Many of you will have heard of Oscar's Law. Now, Oscar's Law is an organisation that has been pushing for reform for the dog and cat breeding industries for some time now, and it's come about by a dog called Oscar. Oscar was rescued from a puppy farm at about 5 years old, and he was in pretty shocking condition. And so he's almost become this mouthpiece for the movement. So what has come about from that is this legislation, which is a good thing. It really is a good thing, because those of you that are unaware, puppy farms, also called puppy mills, also called puppy factories, are large-scale commercial breeding facilities that are breeding puppies for the commercial market, and they're breeding puppies for profit. In these places, there are large numbers of dogs. They are generally kept in cages or small pens. They have, in many cases, they're never let out. They're bred every season, and when they can no longer be bred from, they're killed. So obviously, none of us want that. No one wants a dog to be in that situation. Nobody wants to buy a puppy that's come from a dog in that situation. So what our legislation is doing is it's preventing this. So it's reducing the number of dogs that can be housed by commercial breeding facilities. It's ensuring that commercial breeding facilities are all being registered as domestic animal businesses, and it's ensuring that there's minimum standards that they must meet with regard to dogs being able to come out of their pens, how often they can be bred, and also what happens to them when they have finished breeding, when they can no longer breed. So under this new legislation, they can't just be taken out back and shot. Not allowed. They have to have a retirement program. Domestic animal businesses must have a retirement program for these animals and can only be put down with veterinary certificate if there is no other option. So That's good. That's a big step forward for us in animal welfare. You'll notice I'm using the term animal welfare and not animal rights, because animal rights is very politically loaded, so I'm talking animal welfare here. So, the reason domestic animal businesses are treated differently to breeders that are members of applicable organisations is because applicable organisations already have their regulations that they must follow, and it's policed within the organisation. So, for example, me as an ANKC breeder, I have to follow a code of ethics and a code of practice from the ANKC. So, for example, I'm not allowed to breed any of my dogs before a certain age, 18 months old. I am not allowed to breed my dogs more than twice in 18 months. So I can't breed them every single season. I need to be accountable to my puppies and to the people that purchase my puppies or the people that are given my puppies. And it doesn't matter if it's given away, and it doesn't matter if it's sold. And I need to be accountable for my dogs as they get older. And I am. So any good breeder, any responsible breeder is going to make sure that they know where their puppies are going to. They're going to want to follow up with their puppies. They're going to want to give the puppy purchasers or puppy owners all the information they can so that they are aware of the breed, they're aware of the characteristics, how to look after them, and that they're there for them. So that if they need help or assistance or they're having an issue, that they can call them. And then if there's any reason at all why they can no longer keep their dog at any point during their lifetime, as a registered breeder with the ANKC, I'm obliged to take that dog back. And I do. And I will. And every breeder that I've spoken to feels the same way. Because we're responsible for those dogs for life. So they should never end up in a shelter or homeless. And that's the whole point of it. And of course, we've also got minimum standards of how we care for our dogs. And every one of us, we don't just meet the minimum standards because we're hobby breeders. We do it for the love of it. And we want to look after our dogs. We're not in there just to make money. So because of that, we are treated differently to if we were just breeding our dogs, because we are accountable to the ANKC, and the ANKC can suspend our membership, they can fine us, they can, at worst case scenario, they can expel us, and then we're no longer a member. So they do have powers of disciplinary action that they can take. And this is paralleled as well in the cat fancy. So this is why we're treated differently. Where we are not treated differently, anybody, be it a small breeder that just breeds their dog that they've got or their cat, or be it a registered breeder like myself that has, might have a litter every 1 or 2 years, or someone that perhaps breeds more often, or someone that is a commercial animal business, they need to have a registered number for the pet exchange register. The pet exchange register is something that is coming in this year. It comes in this year. It comes in June this year. And every puppy, every kitten, every dog that's being given, sold, or otherwise advertised for rehoming needs to also display this number. And this is so they can authorities can follow where these animals have gone and what's happened to them and who's responsible, which we're already doing as ANKC breeders, so we don't mind doing this. And it just gives another level of accountability, and that's something that's new that's coming with this legislation. So that's also important to know. What else? That's pretty much the Oscars Law new legislation in a nutshell. Victoria are definitely moving forwards with this, and I suppose the other thing I should mention is that you can't buy puppies in pet shops anymore under this legislation, so isn't that great? Under this new legislation, only puppies or dogs from rescue organisations or foster carers can be sold in pet shops, sold, given away, whatever, which is great, because that old adage of how much is that dog in the window is never a good thing. You've got impulse buying going on. You don't want to impulse buy a dog or a cat or a pet. They're a lifetime commitment, and you need to make sure that that pet is suitable for your lifestyle. And they're a living thing. They're a living creature. So you can't just see a pet in the window anymore and go, I want to buy that, that's cute. You've got to do your research, you've got to know your breeders. It also gives you a chance to see your parents of the puppy or the kitten you're getting, because a lot of the characteristics of a puppy you're going to see in their parents, and you're also going to see how that puppy's been raised. You're going to see how their parents are kept. You're going to see what condition it's in and all those sort of things. So you're going to be able to see that you're buying from a responsible breeder, and that your dog or your cat that you're getting is being well looked after, has been well raised, and that the parents are well looked after. And I think that's important to everybody who's looking at getting a dog or getting a cat or getting any sort of animal. My sources tell me that the latest rumours are that they're looking at this sort of thing for birds, so that's probably next on the agenda, but I'm not actually going to talk about birds today. But apparently that is coming. So, yeah. So I suppose once you get your dog or you get your cat, you've done your research, you've gone, right, I want to get a dog, I want to get a puppy, I want to get a Schipperke because they're just the best, aren't they, Prince? So I'm going to find a really good breeder, a responsible breeder. I'm going to talk to that breeder. I'm going to make sure that this breed's suitable for me, and I'm going to talk to the breeder about my lifestyle. The breeder's going to say, yep, that's good. We're going to look for a puppy that's going to suit your lifestyle. We're going to match it up, so you're going to get a great dog. Great. You've met your breeder, you like what you see, you've got your puppy, you've brought it home. What do you do? What do you do to make sure that you're complying with all your different council regulations and those sort of things? Obviously it differs from council to council, but essentially these same things apply. You'll need to have your puppy or your kitten registered at 3 months old. Registration comes due on the 10th of April every year. It's important to register your pets, and you'll get a registration tag that your pet will need to wear on its collar. Now, your pet should come microchipped. It's law, needs to be microchipped. So make sure you change that microchip details into your name so that if your pet gets lost, you can be found. A microchip, for those that aren't aware, is a very small implant about the size of a grain of rice that is implanted between the shoulder blades. And then if your pet is lost, a vet or a rescue organisation has a scanner. They can run the scanner over the animal and a number will come up. That number correlates with a number on a database. It usually is like Central Animal Records in Victoria, and that number will come up with all the owner's details, their name, their address, their telephone number, so they can call you and say, we've got your dog, and you can come down and collect it. So you can be reunited with your dog. And unlike a tag on a collar that might have a name, the dog's name and phone number, you know, those little fancy Bow Wow type tags, they can possibly fall off. The microchip won't fall off. The advantage to a tag, of course, is if it's found by just somebody in the street, they can call you up. You need a scanner to scan a microchip. But getting back to it is that the microchip is legally required when you purchase your puppy, should already be microchipped. So you should get a form that says all the microchip details. Make sure you send that in and make sure that you have that changed. If you do ever move house, update your phone number, get a new mobile phone number, any of those sort of things. Remember to update your microchip information, and you can do that one free of charge on their website, because if you move, you want to make sure that your updated information is there. So if your dog then gets lost, or your cat, you've then got your proper details, because there's no point having an old phone number that they're not going to get through, they're not going to be able to contact you. So microchipping is important. So you've got registration at 3 months, you've got microchip, make sure the microchip's in your name, transfer. If you bought a pedigree dog or a pedigree cat, you will get a certificate of pedigree. Now, this is a document that allows for you to see the parents and the grandparents and the great-grandparents of your puppy or your kitten, and so you'll also need to transfer that into your name as well. You can do that. That is not done through the council, that's done through the organisation. So if it's a puppy, it's done through the Australian National Kennel Council, which is Dogs Victoria here in Victoria, and you can transfer that to your name. So then you've transferred your pedigree papers, you've transferred your microchip, and you've registered your dog with the council or your cat. I've got to remember, this mirrors for cats, remember, guys. So now, then what do? Obviously, if it's a puppy, you should do a puppy preschool, but that's not law. What is law is that your puppy has some basic training, has well fenced yard. You do not want your dog wandering. It could get lost, it could get injured, it could get hit by a car, it could get stolen. You don't want any of those things happening. That's right. Also, if you live in the country and your dog strays onto another farming property and is worrying stock, it can have some very negative consequences for your animals. So make sure that does not happen, because you don't want your beloved pet, getting overexcited at sheep and being shot for it. So very, very important. Have good fencing. And it's also a law that you can't have your dog wandering, guys. So make sure, yes, keep your dog safe. Also make sure that your dog always has adequate food, water and shelter, bedding, clean bedding, preventative care must be done, your veterinary care must be done, and all those sort of things. You should also do at least basic training with any animal too, that's just being a responsible owner. So that's what you need, legally what you need to do. So make sure that you keep your registrations up to date, and make sure that you keep your dog on a leash if it's out in public, unless you're in an off-leash area. If you're in an off-leash area, there'll be signs, then you can let your dog off the leash and let it have a run. Probably a good idea to make sure it'll come back before you do that. So that's basic training. But legally, you need to have your dog restrained. So have it behind a fence when you're at home. Have it on a lead when you're out, unless you specifically go to an off-leash area. And there are some of those. Your council can help you with this. And remember, council regulations will vary with regard to how many dogs or cats you can own and those sort of things. So it's always a good idea to speak to your council as well and make sure that you're on the right track. So that's the basic nutshell of the laws of dogs and cats and pets, and what you do with choosing a good breeder, what's required by breeders, and how to avoid supporting establishments that aren't necessarily doing right by their breeding stock, because I know technically they are breeding stock, but they're also living creatures, and they deserve certain levels of lifestyle and comfort and those sort of things. So I haven't seen any questions come up for this Facebook Live. I hope I'm looking at the right spot, because as you know, this is only my second Facebook Live for TBA, and I'm not all that experienced in it, but if you have asked a question and I haven't seen it, very sorry about that. Didn't mean to, not answer your question. If you've got any questions about animal welfare or anything, you can always send a message in through Facebook, or you can contact our office and we can assist you with that. Yeah, that's right, we can. So I hope you've enjoyed having a very special guest presenter, which is Little Prince, come along for the day. I hope you can all see him. I can see his ears, so I'm sure he's had a lovely time communicating this to you as well. We've spoken now for about half an hour, so that's probably about all we're going to say at this point, but we've pretty much covered everything, so we'll just recap before we finish up. Recapping is new legislation, Puppy Farms Amendments Act, came in 2017. It's starting to hit now in July 2019. That's important. It's going to affect the conditions and the ways of breeding establishments in Victoria. It's the only state thus far to do it, and so I suppose in a way it's a pilot state for that. It requires smaller numbers of dogs or cats to be housed. It gives minimum standards of how those dogs or cats are to be housed. It prevents puppies and kittens being sold in pet shops unless they come from rescue organisations or foster carers. It distinguishes between applicable organisations and commercial breeders and recreational breeders, and so you need to know what you fit into if you're looking at that. It introduces the Pet Exchange Register, which is a registration number that will be on every advertisement for any dog or puppy, or whether it's free to good home right through to a very expensive puppy purchase. and that will allow for additional tracking for these animals. Once you've got your animal home, make sure you've got secure fencing, make sure you've got shelter, make sure you've got food and water, make sure you do your basic training, make sure your animal gets plenty of exercise and stimulation, make sure the microchip's in your name, make sure you're registered with the council, and make sure that your animal doesn't roam or in the country get out and worry stock. So have a leash, and if it's a cat, make sure you bring the cat in at night. That's pretty much all from me. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and from Prince and from myself and TBA